everyone, this is KTRU Radio.
Hey everyone, I'm Raye. I'm here in Long Beach, California. I am a singer-songwriter, musical activist, and storyteller and folk songstress, and currently off the road musician.
So there's a quote about you from Pop Matters that says, "Speaking truth to power, Raye Zaragoza is a voice made for our times." Most people today, when they think protest music, they tend to think, oh, rap, hip hop, rock, etc. And I think what makes you different is that as a musical activist, your genre is primarily contemporary folk. How did you end up in this genre?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I don't know, honestly, folk music is not the most diverse genre. A lot of times I am at folk conferences, folk music, festivals and everything, and there are not that many people of color in folk music, to be honest and blunt, and it's definitely no mystery or it's no secret. And so I get that question a lot, and I think it's very interesting and how I happened to be in folk music, and to be honest, it's just what I listened to growing up. I love James Taylor. I loved Carole King. I loved Joni Mitchell. I loved all of these, Bob Dylan. I loved all of these, people who are really telling stories through music. And I think why I gravitated towards folk music is because of the way it is storytelling, and it's like you can listen to a folk song and know pretty much exactly what they are saying. There's not, it's really, I don't know, I loved Harry Chapin growing up because his songs were little plays, they were just stories, they were novels, and I really wanted to create music like that. And so I started making folk music for that reason. And it's interesting because it's not like I come from a family of folk musicians. My dad's a mariachi musician. And so, I didn't get into making mariachi music. And so it's interesting how I ended up in folk music. But it's just really what I loved as a kid. And I think part of me wants to diversify folk music, not just with who I am and my ethnic background, but also with the stories being told. And I want to tell stories through folk music that appeal to a broader audience of people and relate to people who don't get their voice heard, as much, especially in the folk music genre. So that's how I ended up in folk music.
Speaking of the fact that your folk music isn't necessarily the most diverse in terms of the artists, do you ever consider the fact that you're taking risks with talking about these, to some people, political, controversial topics, like social justice issues, talking about your experience as a woman in the US and as a person of color in the US, because especially there are many people who would think, oh, you're an artist, stay in your lane. Don't just sing your song, do your performance, and then get off the stage.
Yeah, totally.
But with your music, you kind of do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Why do you find this as a risk? And why did you take that risk?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. It's interesting because I think when I first started writing music, when I was 19, 20, I only wrote love songs. I kind of heard, I was oh, every song is about love, so I'm gonna write about love. And I remember at age 21, I was ready to quit music because I was this is so boring to me. I was I'm so sick of just playing songs I wish this guy liked me and I'm so sad and la la la, when at the same time I was going through, I was witnessing so much injustice in the world through the eyes of my family and my ancestors and my life and my everyday experience walking on the street. But I never wrote about those things because in my head, it was no one wants to hear that. People want to see a singer-songwriter get up in a pretty dress in her nice looking outfit or whatever and just sing her song and be pretty and go off the stage. Like that's what I always thought too. And part of me wanted to be that. I wanted that. I wanted to be this beautiful songstress who can get on stage with a really expensive guitar and strum a chord and play a song and everyone be so happy and that it be it. But that was never me. It was never me, no matter how hard I tried. And so I almost quit music. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to start writing about the things that actually matter to me. I'm going to start writing about my actual experience as a human being, not just as a teenager. And that's when I started writing like protest songs. And it's interesting because I talked to some other like artists who are also like seen as activists, especially in like the indigenous music community. And some of them are like, yeah, I'm not an activist. You know, it's funny because sometimes I feel silly. It's like being called an activist. And sure, I do things as an activist outside of my music, but as a musician, it's interesting to be called an activist because I'm just writing songs about my life. I'm just honestly putting my diary entries to paper. I'm really just talking about my experience as a woman of color. I'm really just talking about my family's experience. So it's interesting that, you know, I read this one quote about how being a person of color is like by default politicized. So like being like the political nature of your life is not something that you chose. So like the political nature of my music was not really something I chose. And so as I go deeper into my own, I think, reclamation of my identity as a person of color, as a mixed race human being, as a woman, and all of these things that make me who I am that I'm so proud of, I think the more political my music gets, just because of the subject of my existence. If that makes any sense.
Just talking about your existence, people say like, oh, do something relatable. Don't talk about being a minority. Don't talk about being a woman in this country. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, you know, I was a lot of times people will be like, why do you have to make everything about race? Like, why is everything about race? Like, why can't you just be happy and stop making so much noise? Like, it's not always about race. And I'm like, I was listening to this podcast that I love. It's called Pod Save the People. And Raye, the guy on the podcast, he was saying how everyone's always telling him, like, why do you have to make things about everything about race? And he was like, why does race, like, dang, how did he say it? It was like, why, they were like, why do you have to make everything about race? And he was like, why does race have to make everything about me? Or something like that. And basically it's like, race has been such a huge part of my life since I was a kid. It's the first thing anyone asks me when they meet me. It's changed a little bit because sometimes people know who I am if they know my music, so they know not to like ask me my race because I think they have heard me talk about it, or they just know because I talk about it openly. But people will come up to me like, where are you from? Or who are you? Or like, what are you? That's my favorite one. What are you? And I'm just like, I'm a robot. Like, what do you mean? I'm like a human being. Like, why can't you ask me what my name is or how my day is before you ask what I am? And it's almost like people want to place me in a box that makes them comfortable before they get to know me. And I've been dealing with that my whole life. And so when people ask me why I make everything about race, I'm always like, I don't really feel like that was something that was chosen for me. This has been an identity crisis I've dealt with my whole life that I still continue to battle and think about and like wonder about who am I, blah, blah, blah. And so it's interesting when they're like, why did you choose that? And I'm like, this wasn't a choice. This is just American existence. And it's something that I'm trying to lean into because I think there's a lot of rich story within it. And I don't think it's all dissonant. I think a lot of it is really beautiful. And I think that being a minority, being mixed race is something that I wouldn't trade for the world. I'm so proud of where I come from and who I am. And the fact that I've had this identity battle my whole life of being a bunch of different cultures. And so I just think it's a story that deserves to be told. And when I was younger, I didn't hear anyone talk about it that much through music. So maybe I can be that person for other young folks out there looking for someone to voice their story.
You said you didn't hear that through the music you listened to, but do you think your identity was helped by the fact that you grew up in New York City and LA, two cities that are incredibly diverse and have very strong music scenes?
Totally. Yeah, growing up in New York City was amazing. I grew up really fast. You know, I was like on my own taking the subways to dance class when I was like 11, and I think that I could go to Virgin Records and buy my own CD with my allowance. Like I could do that. I had everything at my fingertips, which I'm so, so grateful for that I was able to do. And that definitely shaped my music knowledge and also just my own relationship to my identity, because, you know, New York is a diverse place. And even so, you know, I still dealt with my own fair share of, you know, feeling isolated for being mixed race. Because even though it is incredibly diverse, I didn't know any other like native Mexican, Taiwanese, Japanese kids other than my siblings. And so it's interesting to feel like you're in this metropolis of diversity and still feel isolated. So, you know, that's something I think about. But I think that New York and LA were incredibly nurturing places for my art, because I was always brought up that you can do anything, you know, and that being an artist is a very valid thing to be, you know, and being an artist is an act of service, and being an artist can help people. And like when I was a kid, my next door neighbor was a painter, and our other next door neighbors were costume designers on Broadway. And so to me, like art was everywhere. And so I definitely think that growing up in a city really shaped who I am in my own relationship with myself, but also growing up in New York, I didn't grow up, you know, connected to a lot of my heritages, because I was not brought up in Japan or Taiwan or in Arizona or in Mexico or close to my family of any of these backgrounds. And so we grew up kind of isolated in my nuclear family from all of it. So, you know, that all went into it, but I'm so, so grateful for growing up in New York for sure.
Let's talk about your album and your latest single that you've released. So Fight For You, it was released in 2017?
Yeah, like a long time ago.
In this album, you included some of the themes include like the power of protest, your experience in the U.S., which like as we touched, some people will say it's like, oh, it's political, but that was your life as, well, that is your life as a woman of color in the U.S. And then you also talk about not distancing, social justice.
Yeah.
And then you have a dash of normalness.
Yeah.
Love songs about New York City. How did you come to choose these songs and put it in an album?
Yeah, you know, that album was so interesting because what happened was I wrote the song In the River in September of 2016. And the song, you know, kind of went viral in like, the word viral to me sounds like it's just terrible now. It's like, I don't want to use the word viral in these
That's a good word.
awful days we're living in. It caught fire. That's awful also. It's like, how do we explain this without really graphic terms? Anyway, you all get what I'm saying. But a lot of people watched it, and I was grateful for that. And what happened was people were asking me, when does the album come out? They were like, when does the album come out? And I was like, what album? Like, I don't have an album, you know? And so then I was like, you know what? They're asking for an album. Let's make them an album. And so basically, I'd been writing songs for years and had never released a full-length album. So I took a couple of songs that I always wanted to release that I loved, that were the more like normal love songs, like Bushwick Avenue and Speedway and Chase the Child. And I put them together with all of these songs I had written during the Standing Rock movement, like Driving to Standing Rock and Fight For You and In the River. And to me, they all kind of went together because it was kind of my own it was my own progress as a human being and my own coming to terms with who I am. And I threw in some of those love songs, but also it was really a snapshot of that time in my life of really finding who I was or who I am, and finding my voice as a singer-songwriter, especially through protest songs. And so it was kind of like a fight for you. I always say it's about fighting for what you believe in, but also fighting for yourself. So that's kind of how those songs all came together.
You also released recently, you released Fight Like a Girl. Mm-hmm. I believe, was it end of March or early April?
It was April 10th. Yeah.
Did you intend on releasing it originally in April before COVID shut everything down? Or did you decide like it's going to be a while?
Yeah. So we actually kind of sped up the release because of COVID, because I think we could have released it a couple weeks later, but we released it maybe just a couple weeks earlier. So it wasn't a huge difference, but I wanted to release the song as soon as I could with everything that was going on, because I felt like everyone and my fans and my community online like needed an empowering song. Like everyone was really in low spirits, as everyone continues to be, going up and down a roller coaster of low spirits and hope and low spirits. And but I think at this point, a lot of people, we've kind of become a little more acclimated to our reality, because it's not as new as it was 6 weeks ago. But I just wanted to give like an offering. I just was like, I have these songs and they're done and we're going to start releasing them. So I think this is a good time to release them, to release one at least, because I know for me, music is healing. And if this song can be healing, or can be a song that people can exercise to at home, or they can dance around to at home, or just use at home in any way as they are, or to play on their way to work for essential workers, or anything that could just be the least bit empowering for people, I felt like it was the time to release it. And so, yeah, I think we released it maybe like a couple weeks early, but nothing too crazy change.
Speaking of quarantine, how has everything shutting down affected you, whether it's your lifestyle, career, interacting with the community and loved ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everything has changed, as it has for, I'm sure, everyone listening. I was on tour 80% of the year for the past 2 to 4 years. It's all kind of a blur. I don't even know. I was on tour about 80% of the year. Hardly, I was talking to someone yesterday, I think I was saying that for at least the past 2 years, I don't think I slept in the same bed for more than 7 days. Like I was always traveling. And now I've been in my apartment here in Long Beach straight through since the end of February, which is wild. I haven't gone that long without traveling in a very long time, maybe over 5 years. And so it's been an incredibly reflective time for me. I think that when you keep really busy and when you travel a lot, it's really easy to ignore a lot of things that you're not facing, whether big or small. And so I've been doing a lot of processing, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of just thinking about who I am outside of my music. Because when you're on tour all the time, everything is about the music. Everything is about the performance. Everything is about you as an artist. And which I obviously love and I miss. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about who I am aside from being a touring artist. Like who am I as like a human being who stays at home? Like I have a routine now. Like I wake up at like 6 a.m. I do morning pages, if anyone knows the artist way. I meditate, I practice guitar, I make myself breakfast, I exercise. Like I have like a routine every day that's been really wonderful. And I haven't had a routine, I don't know if ever. I only ever had a routine before. And so I'm definitely valuing myself as a human being more than ever, not just as a touring artist. That's been wild. And obviously there's a lot of changes, you know, financially for musicians. It's really hard. I'm one of the lucky ones. I have a Patreon. I started a record label on Patreon with all of my patrons and my fans. And that has made it so that this transition to being an at-home musician has not been very stressful. And so I'm so grateful for all of my patrons and my Patreon and Rebel River Records. And if you're listening, patrons, I love you.
So, excuse me. For those who weren't keeping up with South by Southwest lineup, you were one of the many artists who was supposed to perform at South by before it get canceled. Since we don't know when things will go back to normal and when the next South by will happen, could you give us a glimpse of what your set list would have been?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was planning on playing a bunch of songs at South by that I had never played before live. So I was going to play, I mean, I've played Fight Like a Girl live, but I was going to play Fight Like a Girl and songs from my new record these songs are called like He Calls Me River, Run with the Wolves. Run with the Wolves is a song based on the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is basically about women like reclaiming their power and reclaiming their like natural instincts like wolves. And I love it. So there's that song. A song called Rebel Soul. And a song called The Ghosts of House and Street. And then a bunch of my older songs like Fight for You and In the River and Driving to Standing Rock. It was going to be a good show.
I'm sad too. Like you were in my queue for shows.
We will go again. It'll happen again.
Someday. Or you can just come to Houston and play.
Perfect. I'll drive right over.
Alrighty. Any last question? Sorry, not last question. If there was a question that, hold on. I am so rusty with this. Dear
You're
Lord.
good.
Hold on. How do I want this? Is there a question? Okay, hold on. If you were in charge of this interview, what question do you wish people like me had asked you, and how would you answer it?
Oh, that's a good one. I've never heard that question. That circular question. What would I ask? I would ask, what artists am I listening to right now that we're going to play at South by that I am sad to miss out on?
Oh, okay.
And so I am so sad that I did get to see Field Medic at South by. I love Field Medic. And it's really sad because I was going to see, he was playing in LA at the Roxy like 2 weeks before South by. And I was going to go to the show. And I was like, nah, I'll see him at South by. And I did get to see him at South by. Abraham Alexander. Oh my gosh. Amazing. I literally just stalked like the South by Southwest Spotify playlist and found him. Oh my gosh, wait, I have a playlist of all my South by picks. So there's Abraham Alexander, there was Field Medic, there was this one girl who's a local in Austin who's amazing. And oh my gosh, I want to listen to her song like right now. It's so good. Her name is Emily Wolf. So good. So I think those are my top 3 that I was really excited to see. Yeah.
We'll see what happens with South by in the future. I don't know how they're going to figure things out later.
I don't know.
Alrighty, before we move on to part 2 of the interview, do you want to drop any socials or your Patreon?
Yeah, so find me on Patreon, join the record label Rebel River Records, and that's patreon.com/Raye Zaragoza, and you can see the spelling of my name, I believe, right here on the Zoom. And find me at Raye Zaragoza on Instagram. You'll find me on Facebook, and As of yesterday, I'm on TikTok. So follow me on TikTok at Raye Zaragoza. Trying to keep up with the kids.